even as I was writing it, I didn't know 100% where I was going to go.
It's a special kind of sickness, you know.
Honestly, I don't understand why we don't have hypercolor shirts now.
This is us at the show.
Yeah. I love that opening so much. Like, seriously, it's professional, which makes us seem way better than we are. It's fun. Dude, everything's just awesome with that. What's up, guys? This is Chuck and friends, and we're talking about Essence House.
I am glad to be your colleague. So, thanks for taking me along on this journey.
I really appreciate you coming along. I could totally have done this without you, but having you along has made it slightly more enjoyable. No, guys, this would be nowhere if it weren't for Eric Cockrell. Eric does so much amazing stuff, and he also pays enough time to sit and write with me, too. So, I mean, the man can do an awful lot, and I hope to do half of what he does one day, because I really don't want to work a lot. We're expecting, because this is all part of IndieVent, we're expecting some people that we may not have met before. So maybe we should tell them a little bit about Essence House real quick.
Yeah, well, so we want to play a couple episodes today. We want to play 3 and 4. So Chuck, do you want to run through a rundown of what happens in 1 and 2 to get to this point?
I can. It's better than having to run through an entire season.
Yeah, which you've done in a pretty short amount of time before, so I have faith you can nail this one.
So the idea of Essence House is it all starts with our boy Tim Edmond. We find out very quickly that he's been asked to be the caretaker of the family plot, and they've turned it in. They used to have a house there known as the Essence House. In 1995 or sometime thereafter, it was torn down, and they've recently turned it into a plaza. And so he is taking care of it for his uncle Rick, who is in charge of the ancestral land and everything. And now Tim is in there, and he's taking care of the property. While doing so, he finds out that someone was trying to break into the tool shed, which normally he wouldn't really care about at all. But his Uncle Rick was adamant. No one goes in the tool shed. And the person who broke in left their wallet behind, and it turns out that it was his cousin, Tristan. Why his cousin would be trying to break into a stupid tool shed, he wasn't sure. But he ended up running around trying to track down his cousin, finding out an awful lot of weirdness along the way, including a man who talked about his grandfather as having died in 1972, even though Tim, only 30-something years old, remembers hanging out with his grandfather very, very distinctly. And another woman effectively going into a catatonic coma in her shop. And so there's an awful lot of weirdness. He eventually tracks down his cousin Tristan, who is basically in kind of full conspiracy theory mode, has all of these papers out and everything, and basically tells Tim that there's an awful lot he doesn't know about Essence House, and so he wants to show him. So he takes Tim to the tool shed late at night. The two of them go inside. When they go in there, Tim starts looking around, or Tristan starts looking around, can't find anything, and eventually underneath the lawnmower, they find a door. They go down into the door, find themselves in a wood cellar, or in a wine cellar. When they go back upstairs via the other stairs, they find themselves in the original Essence House as they remember it as kids. How it's there, they don't know, but that's how Essence House episode 2 or chapter 2, as we're about to turn it into a book, ends. So they've found out that Essence House is in fact somehow still around. How is that possible? And what the heck is going on here? That's what we'll be seeing in episodes 3 and 4. We'll play 3 for you first, have a little chit chat about it, And then we'll go right back into 4 and end out the evening with any questions or comments that we have as it comes along.
So while we're going, if you want to ask any questions, we can address them either on the spot or discuss them in between. So go ahead and hit us with whatever. And hello, everybody. I see a lot of highs in the comments. So.
Oh, gee, I haven't seen. Yeah, I haven't even found the video yet.
We have Wendy, Dan, James.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right. So, boom. And me and Chuck will be on screen for you to stare at our handsome faces during this.
Hey.
All right. Now I'm muting you, Chuck.
Studio Erbo and Bonfire Press present Essence House by Eric J. Cockrell and Chuck Pineau. Chapter 3: The Healing Hands of Time. Many amazing parties have been held in the enormous parlor of Essence House in its time. The past century saw the most amazing annual Christmas balls. Roland Edmond was known for his holiday festivities. The house was said to surpass capacity many a year. Neighbors never complained about the noise, nor their lack of invitation. They were all friendly with Roland and knew that family was the most important thing in the world, and only family was invited. Tim stood there in the parlor with his cousin Tristan. Suddenly, he was overtaken by a memory of watching as his grandfather gave a speech on the steps that extended across from where he stood. Gramps addressed the room every year. Some years he did so with a glass of whiskey, and some years he did so after several glasses of whiskey. The incident that danced in Tim's head just now was of a time that followed several whiskeys, and Gramps opted for a short speech, after which he took a spill on the floor and was carried off to his office that sat parallel to the parlor. "Tim," spoke Tristan with his hand extended. Tim shook it off. He knew Tristan had been trying to get through to him for a good minute, but was so lost in thought that he couldn't respond, and hadn't paid attention enough to do so, even if he could. "I'm sorry, what was that again?" Tim responded. Tristan again extended his hand. "Turn off your phone's light and wake up. You've been in a daze ever since we got upstairs." "I'm sorry, it's just..." Tim started. Tristan headed to the adjoining kitchen. "Breaker box has to be around here somewhere." "Tristan, what is this? How is this possible? It's supposed to be gone." Tim finally woke from his fog. "How would I know?" Tristan retorted. Tim shrugged. "Well, you knew it was here, so it stands to reason you might know a bit about it." "Well, I honestly don't know anything. Just guesses, really," Tristan said as he shone the light around. "And I don't know if you're ready for those." "Try me." Tim regarded him solidly, his features devoid of fear or any real emotion. He had a million guesses, and yet none all at once. Tristan's advantage was having had time to digest the insanity of all of it. "Let me get the lights on, then we can talk," Tristan said as he threw open a cupboard. The sky lit up outside the house, enough to show that it was raining something fierce. Lightning cracked overhead. "That's a strange storm for a January night," Tim thought to himself, but so much was strange that he didn't dare mention it out loud. Tristan flipped some switches, and after a few tries, the lights flickered and lit up the kitchen. "There we go." The house lit up. Tim stepped back into the parlor to see if it matched his memory. It did. The stone fireplace against the wall, the mantel that held pictures of family members, and an ornate clock that looked as though it dated back well into the last century, if not longer. The upholstered bench that sat in front of the window, looking out onto the grounds. In the corner of the room was an old phonograph with the horn-style speaker. Against the walls were shelves of books that didn't look as though they had been touched in quite some time. Facing the fireplace were a pair of leather-backed chairs that swiveled. Tim remembered grandfather seated in his chair, and ancient tome in his lap as he read fairy tales to Tim and the other children. They didn't get the modernized version either. Spoiler alert, the Little Mermaid turned into sea foam and died. I can't involve you in this, Tim. Please go back, declared Tristan. Are you serious? I'm not going anywhere without you. I told your father I'd keep tabs on you until he arrived. Tim grabbed Tristan's arm. Let's get back up to the shed and talk about this. Being in here creeps me out. Tristan yanked his arm from Tim's grip and gave Tim a shove. You won't stop me, Tim. Get out of here. Stop you? Said Tim, clearly confused. Stop you from doing what exactly? Please, just leave. Tristan repeated his sentiment. Tim could hear the pleading tone in his voice, but he was having none of any of this. Something about this place, whatever this was, it was affecting Tristan. Was it a hallucination? A shared dream of some sort? This is all crazy. We are standing in a house that does not exist. It's been gone for about 25 years. I just stood on this spot yesterday. It's a parking lot. Tim had to rationalize this somehow. Because to believe was to drag himself into a pit of unknown, where nothing made sense and he couldn't possibly find the answers to be satisfied. Tristan headed towards the main staircase, heading up with loud, clomping footsteps. Tim chased him and grabbed him by the shoulder. Where the hell do you think you're going? Tim asked. For the first time since they had reunited, Tristan was the aggressor. His lower lip trembling as he shouted, spittle flying, as uncontained as his reaction. What do you care? You won't believe anyways. And you've seen where we are. He pushed Tim's hand off his shoulder to emphasize his point with a frustrated grunt. The two stared at each other for a long, uncomfortable silence. Tim wanted to say that he believed, but he didn't even know what he would be admitting to. None of this made any sense at all, and he couldn't find a single rope to cling to in this plunge from reality. No, that wasn't entirely true. If he could calm his cousin down, there was Tristan. By this time, Tristan had turned to face completely away from Tim, his shoulders rising and falling with his heavy breathing. Okay, you aren't wrong. Look, all I know is that somehow I'm inside of Essence House, a home that was knocked down like 20 or so years ago. So, yeah, I'm having a hard time believing anything. But I have no clue what is actually happening right now. So why don't you try to explain to me, as best as you possibly can, what's going on? And maybe I won't try to stop you from whatever it is you're talking about. Tristan nodded solemnly and waved back toward the parlor. Tim left grandfather's chair for Tristan, hoping the familiarity would calm him down some. But it also felt apropos, since he was the one telling the story. Tristan breathed out a loud sigh. So, yeah, this place was torn down in the late 90s after my mom and your parents died. Dad had spiraled out of control. He was drinking a lot. You and Elise had moved, so by that time, it was just he and I. I remember. He paused to gather up the courage to continue. One night, I heard Dad arguing right here. I had gotten up because of a bad dream or something, but the sound of loud voices kept me from going back to sleep. So I crept down the stairs and I heard it much better. But here's the weird thing. Dad was yelling at Grandpa. Tim saw Tristan staring back at him, which quickly made him aware of his gaping mouth. He closed it sheepishly, but offered no reply. It was too soon for him to say anything, and if he did, it would be more doubting, which wouldn't help at all. Grandpa was sitting right here, while Dad railed on him. I couldn't make out everything that he was saying, but basically, he couldn't believe that Grandpa wouldn't help to bring Mom back. Grandpa tried to assure him that there wasn't a way, that it doesn't work like that, but Dad called him a coward. He said that was why Grandpa was dead, and no one cared to bring him back. Dad stormed out, and when I peeked into the parlor, Grandpa was sitting there quietly, with his hands in his lap, the way he used to. He noticed me and waved me over. Tristan was relating the story, but he no longer seemed to notice Tim's reactions. He was lost in the memories. Of course, there was the obvious, you've gotten so big and all of that, but I had to ask him how he was still alive. Tim, he said, finally regarding his cousin for the first time in what seemed like minutes. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, I'm not. He went on to tell me that the only people in the house that were alive were me and my dad. The house, he said, was magical. Yeah, okay, I see your face, but these are his words, not mine, all right? Just listen. Tim tried to control his features, apologized, and beckoned for Tristan to continue. He said that the house both existed in the present and in the past, all the way back to when it had been built on this spot. I laughed at him, but that's when he told me the one thing that made me believe him. Tristan finally seemed as close to normal as possible. Of course, the two of them were seated in a parlor that had been torn down decades before, so normal was a really relative term at this point. Grandpa died in 1972. That's like 15 years before I was even born. And yet, we hung out with him all the time when we were growing up. How do you explain that? Tim caught himself. The more things were drifting from any form of reality, the more they made sense. Crap, Barnabas was right, he muttered. Tristan narrowed his eyes, but Tim waved him off. Yeah, don't worry about it. Compared to this, it's literally nothing, Tim sighed. You're now the second person today to tell me that Gramps had died that long ago, so I'm not even going to argue the point. So if I put aside my doubts and just accept the fact that this place now has more in common with a DeLorean than a house, what would I be trying to stop you from doing? Tristan regarded Tim with every ounce of sincerity he had. He knew in his mind he had only one chance at this. If Tim didn't go for it now, he wouldn't at all. Knowing what we know about this place and what it can allow us to do, I just can't stop thinking about the plane crash. No. Tim's eyes widened, and he caught himself shaking his head slowly. His mind whirled with so many thoughts that his body simply took over. The responses were instant. Even his mouth moved and words formed, all while he tried to grasp at anything that could make sense. He was incredibly unsuccessful. That's crazy. You can't change anything. It happened already. Gramps even said so. Tim's autopilot had decided it was not letting this discussion go any further. That's absolute crap, Tim. You didn't even know such a thing was possible 10 minutes ago, and now you're telling me what you can and can't do? You have no idea what's possible, and Grandpa was probably just worried that he would lose another son before his time. I could save my mom, your parents even, and everything could be better. My dad wouldn't be so certifiable. The house would still be standing. How can you possibly be against this? What kind of proof can you have that this won't work? Proof? You want proof? Tim spat, holding his hands out to begin the count. All we have is stories that something like this exists, and it never goes well. So the only proof I have is 3 Back to the Future movies, anything with the name Terminator, 1 bad Star Trek movie, and every version of The Flash. Tristan snarled visibly. No way! I refuse to listen to some stupid rioters who have no clue that something like this could even exist. We have an opportunity to right wrongs. We get our parents back. My dad won't have made so many mistakes. He'd be a better version of himself. Things were finally clicking for Tim. He was getting control of his brain and was thinking ahead. He pointed to the door they had come in. No, we've got to leave now. Your dad is exactly why we can't do this. He knows about what this place can do and still doesn't want you here. He doesn't want either of us knowing the potential and power Essence House has. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Rick knows better. If he doesn't want us here, there's a damned good reason for it. Tristan flexed his fists. He wanted to knock Tim off his feet so bad, but what would that accomplish? And really, could he? Tim looked like Chicago had toughened him up, at least a little bit. With a bitter sigh, he took the first steps towards the door. I'll go, but I'm not going to promise you that I won't find a way to bring them back. The two made a silent retreat back to the shed, Tim closing every door behind them. Tristan refused to speak to him from that moment on, and while Tim was putting the mower and snowblower away, and closing and locking the shed, Tristan exited quietly from the scene. Tim, sadly, was no help. For some reason, he was under his father's thumb. But there was nothing that could be done about it now. No, what he needed to focus on was the how. He could break into the shed, no problem. A trip to the hardware store, some bolt cutters, and that problem was dealt with. No, the real problem was how did they travel through time? From his limited experience, and from what Grandpa had said, the house was in every instance of time, from when it had been built to when it had been destroyed. So, how could he go about making the house want to be in the end of 1994? His first stop was the hardware store for bolt cutters. If he didn't grab them while he was thinking about it, he would find himself ready to time travel without being able to open a damned lock. His next step was to go to the local secondhand store. He walked around scanning through clothes, games, toys, and anything he could remember from his youth. Anytime he found something that might work, he checked the internet. Was it a thing in 1994? He picked up an album and checked the date it was released. He couldn't believe his luck. November 1994, shortly before the time of the fateful plane crash. No, he told himself. It wasn't fate, and I'm going to prove that. Screw Dad, screw Tim, screw fate. He didn't need any of them for this. He found himself standing at a cash register with a bag full of stuff that he wouldn't have looked at twice on any other occasion. After this, the plan was to head home and get some rest. He needed to get to the shed when no one would be awake, and he had to do it immediately before Tim could get the chance to get any real security on the building, and before his dad returned to muck everything up. Rick Edmond sat back in the uncomfortable airplane seat. He had grown a little too big to comfortably appreciate flight, but this was an emergency. The embarrassment of having to ask for a seatbelt extender alone would have been reason enough for him to drive. But with Tristan trying to break into the shed, and Tim too slow-witted to stop him, there really wasn't any other choice. With a heaving sigh, he clicked on the extra belt and pulled out his laptop. He searched for a nicer hotel room than what he had offered Tim. He deserved it. He was an old man, and as far as the family was concerned, the singular patriarch. He had earned better sleeping conditions than a motel. Staring out the window as the plane ascended, darkness completely around him, all he could see was his shadow staring back at him. "They're going to screw it up for all of us," he grumbled as the woman across the aisle gave him a strange look and held tighter to her purse. Late that evening, well past the time when the small town had pretty much shut down, Tristan crept up to the roll-up door. He had an old backpack on, wore baggy jeans that hung a little lower than they normally might, and a heavy jacket. Pulling the bolt cutters out of his pack, he approached the door and gave the snips a practice cut or two. "Save your strength. I've got the keys right here, you asshole." Tim approached from behind him, keyring held up for Tristan to easily make out, even in the moonlit darkness. Tristan caught himself holding the cutters in front of him, almost threateningly, but dropped his hands to his sides when he saw what was going on. Tim pushed Tristan aside as the latter watched, turned the light on his phone, and helped the only way he could right now. "What changed your mind?" Tristan asked, sheepishly. Tim chuckled slightly as he pulled off the lock and started to open the door. "The thought you're going to do this almost no matter what I do. Unless I want to sleep here or spend hundreds of dollars on surveillance equipment, you're going to find a way back. And then you won't have anyone watching your back when this thing goes tits up, which I still think it might." He added emphasis to the final statement, hoping that he could change the young man's mind, but understanding in his heart the futility of even trying. As Tim pulled down the door behind them, Tristan looked to see that the mower and blower were parked off to either side of the shed, so they could just slip the cover back and go down the stairs. He pulled on the heavy handle as Tim stepped up behind him. "Nice jacket. The light blue logo. That's the old Rangers jacket, right?" Tristan nodded as he started down the stairs. "Yeah, from back when they won the cup in '94. Tim cocked his head as he followed down the stone stairs. "Wait, you wore a jacket from when they died. Is that your plan?" He started to laugh to himself, while Tristan scowled. Hey, I'm trying, okay? I've got a plan. So your ass hanging out of those jeans is part of the plan, I'm guessing? Tim couldn't suppress his laughter while they made their way through the wine cellar and back up to the house. Screw you, Tristan grumbled as he took off his jacket and tossed it on Grandpa's chair. He carried his pack over to the phonograph. Tim narrowed his eyes as he saw that his cousin was wearing a faded pink t-shirt, but the underarms looked to be slowly encroaching with a blue color that spread out. You've got to be freaking kidding me, he said in glee as he dashed over and grabbed the back of Tristan's shirt. Tristan whipped around and swatted at Tim, but not before it was noticed that the spot where Tim had grasped was now turning blue as well. Now that they faced each other, the words hypercolor were easily seen on the front. You are completely 90s, Tim gasped, grinning broadly. I both love and hate it. Tristan bristled and pulled a record from his pack. Hey, this outfit will help us to get where we want to go. That and this. He held the record up. It was Willie Nelson, looking as old as ever. He didn't know the album, though he, like anyone else, enjoyed Willie, or at least didn't mind him. This is the Healing Hands of Time album. It came out 2 months before the plane crash. I'm going to play it, and we'll close our eyes, imagine where we want to go, and hopefully something good happens. Tim shrugged and took a seat in the other chair. It's our best shot, I guess. The needle scratched the surface of the record as music slowly started to slip out of the long horn that worked as a speaker. Tim closed his eyes, sighed, and let the music flow through him. He tried to take in the memories of early January 1995, before the plane that had held his parents and Tristan's mom had crashed, when life was easier. He felt himself drift away as Willie's words whispered in his ears. So I've already reached mountain peaks, just begun to climb. I'll get over you by clinging to those healing hands of time. Tim's eyes slowly opened and he peered around him. They were not in the Essence House anymore.
It's been a while.
Right? Ah,
Music
this
by
is
Carol
something we
Cox.
should
Theme
do more
music
often.
by-
Today's the day.
Hey, this is Eric Cockrell,
Oh,
the creators of Essence.
go away. Okay.
No, this is Eric Cockrell and Chuck Pineau. Those guys are just doppelgangers. Dude, we've said it before. For those of you guys who are new to Essence House and you're just hearing this for the first time, we didn't know that Mike could sing. We honestly, when we wrote that, we just thought he was gonna say the words, just say them like a poem, and he started singing, and we're like, "Oh shit, he's got pipes!"
That was a great surprise.
Oh, and you know what? So the first of, or one of the early surprises of so many to come. I think what's
that's
been
true, too.
amazing about this entire thing is that there's been so many surprises along the way. You know, even as we're forming the chapters and creating everything and making them up, there's a lot of stuff that we don't throw by one another. And so you read a chapter and you go, "Oh, damn! I love what he did here. I love what he did there. I love this." And so we get to enjoy it as fans, just like you guys do. About every other episode, the other guy wrote it, and it's like, "Oh shit! Look what he did. I love that."
Yep. No, that's great, dude. The other day I was watching the Goldbergs, and there was an episode with hypercolor shirt in it, and it was hilarious.
Right. Oh, they're the best. I love those things. Did we get any questions or anything?
No, people have been quiet.
You bastards. That's okay. We're all still friends.
Dude, there's a lot more Roland in that episode
Well, I mean,
than I remembered.
I don't have to.
There was a lot more of Roland in that episode
There's what?
than I remembered.
Right? Yeah. No, I'm really surprised by that too. And I'm also surprised that we forgot there was that much Roland, and yet even as we continued to play with that character, he still had a lot of the same eccentricities. We didn't, screw with
I
his
like that he got sloshed
personality
at the beginning of the party.
And you know what? We stuck with that. I think the Scotch or whatever it was. I mean, even in EGP, he went there and he was drinking in the bar and stuff. Like that was a part of that character. We get it. And you know what? Tim's very much like his grandfather.
Yeah,
he's just too poor for Scotch, but still.
Also, it was kind of weird having like Rick scenes now, like listening to scenes with Rick.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is weird to go back to this early in the story after, like, we've come so far into the story now.
Yep. Yeah, I mean that first trip into the house, them first having to time travel and how the depth, the levels that they were going to make sure they didn't screw it up and stuff. And now it's like, man, we can do this. We know what's going on.
Yeah, even listening to the ending there and the sound effects of the time travel, like, it took me back to when I first created that sound. Like, it was quite a moment. I just remember being really excited to share that with you at the time.
Oh yeah, and I mean the sound effects are one of my favorite parts. Just so much. It's not my purview at all. I'm not good at that kind of thing at all, and so I get to just sit here and kind of geek out and enjoy it, just on the simplistic level of, "Whoo, that sounds good."
I guess if we got no questions or comments, we could plow right into the essence, chapter 4.
I'm all about plowing in, yeah.
So this is the first real time travel part of the story.
Yep. Where are they? When are they? Did they make it to 1995, or what are we gonna do?
And this is kind of where the story starts to go batshit crazy and fall apart.
It's true, right? Yeah. And actually, this part of the story, we get to come back to an awful lot because, as you said, there is a lot of weirdness that has to be explained later on in the season.
Yep. All right, here we go. I'm going to mute us.
Enjoy, gang.
Hang on, I don't think I set up the sound on that one.
I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to go back and check out some of my stuff and do some work. It's like, oh, yeah, no, I didn't do anything. Right.
It started to play, and I was like, wait, I don't think people can hear it. Hang on.
We're going to tap dance.
Okay, now everybody enjoy.
Studio Erbo and Bonfire Press present Essence House by Eric J. Cockrell and Chuck Pineau. Read by Michael Goodrick. Chapter 4. Into the Essence. Hey, get your hands off that! I had it first! Bellowed the whiny voice of a kid about half Tristan's age. Tristan let go and stepped back. He immediately frisked his belly and arms, much the way security at the airport might. He was all there and accounted for. What the hell's wrong with you guys? This is the last copy and it's mine. Try a different store, the kid continued. Look, kid, it was an honest mistake. It's yours. Sorry, Tristan explained, looking down to find Tim on the ground, holding his head and mumbling something incoherent. Is there a problem here? Said the store clerk as he stepped around the corner, wearing a tie-dyed t-shirt with a blacklight image of a Grateful Dead bear on it. When the hell did you guys get here? I didn't hear the bell ring. Not ready to answer the question at hand, Tristan asked, Can you help me move my friend? He tripped on a cassette tape on the floor of your store. I've seen bigger record shops go down due to lesser negligence. A record store. They were in a record store. Maybe manipulating time was a little more complicated than they had remembered. Grandpa Roland made it all seem so seamless and casual. Tristan's memory was fuzzy. It was a long time ago. But he recalled the way his grandfather would walk through the house with them, pick up an item, and they would hold on as the space around them began to... Well, it was hard to explain what the space around them did. It was almost akin to the time-lapse videos you might watch of a building being built. But it's not that simple when it happens all around you. In the winds. Grandpa referred to them as the winds of change. He had clever names for all of the things that were happening. At the time, it all felt so normal. And as the years went by, those moments just became like any other. What would he say if he knew his two favorite adventurers were on a mission without him? Tristan smiled as he was shaken from his thoughts. Get your friend out of here. I'm not scared of your lawsuit, and I don't need whatever insurance scam you guys are cooking up. Come back in a couple days when I'm not on shift. I couldn't care less. Just don't make me have to deal with that garbage. The clerk offered an exit. Tristan started to lift Tim by his arm, but Tim brushed him away. I'm good. Let's get out of here. The two cousins headed down the aisle, past the rock section, and rounded the corner with the soundtracks. As they reached the front door, Tristan pivoted and yelled to the clerk. Hey, don't miss the Knickerbocker show this summer, or you'll regret it. The blank stares across the store were almost audible. They said so much. Tristan smiled, gave a thumbs up, and flung open the door. As the door closed behind them, the brisk winter air and a rush of freezing wind hit them, reminding Tim that he was experiencing a winter from his youth. New York winters were unforgiving back then. As they reached the bottom of the steps, Tim slugged his cousin. The hell was that for? Tristan exclaimed, grabbing his arm. What the hell was that about? Haven't we seen enough movies about this sort of thing? We can't give any information out about future events, or we risk altering the future, Tim shouted angrily. Tristan is as stunned. Seriously, Tim? This isn't a movie. In case you haven't noticed, we're really here, in real life. And what harm could it do to offer the guy his last chance to see Garcia play his last New York show? You know we both wish we'd had that warning. Besides all that, we literally came here with the express purpose of altering the future. Tim slumped against the brick wall of the building. Are you okay? Tristan asked, a little concerned. Yeah, I'll be fine. I seem to recall this not being unusual for me. It appears time travel gives me a bit of a headache. He stood back up, straight. His memories had slowly come back since discovering Essence House, though they were still jumbled, which made sense since, apparently, so was the timeline. I get it a little too. Speaking of time, we need to figure out what day and time it is. He looked up at the street signs inside. I'm pretty sure we're in Brooklyn. Do you remember how to take the trains upstate from here? Or do we have to steal a car and hit the 87? Tim shook his head and they began walking down the street. Up ahead was a newspaper stand. That'd give them a good amount of information. He hadn't considered the telephone booths nearby. If he'd brought change, he could just call Essence House and anonymously recommend they cancel the flight. Of course, that would be too easy. You got your cell phone with you? Tristan broke the few minutes of silence. Nah, I left it on the dash. I can't imagine cell service would work here anyways. Hell, half the time, it didn't work from the damn loop back home. And that was one of the busiest business districts in the country, explained Tim. I have a vague recollection of my dad using a cell phone on a trip to see Gramps, and it working in some capacity, but it doesn't really make much sense, I suppose. As they approached the corner, the sky darkened notably. It was what you might expect of a cloud interrupting the sunlight, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Both noticed the change, but neither said a word. As Tim stepped into the road, he felt an impact, as if he was struck by a metal bar, and he collapsed to the ground. Tim laid on the ground, but his cousin rushed in the opposite direction. Across the street, he saw a child lying face down, with a twisted bike on the road, halfway between the two of them. Tim got up and brushed himself off. He noticed that his headache was unshakable at this point. He limped a few steps, but the foot pain subsided before he made it to the bike that had assaulted him. Carrying the bike over, he kneeled down and asked, "Is she going to be all right?" The little brown-haired girl sat up, holding her knee that was torn open and black and blue with swelling. "I'm sorry, mister. The man pushed me and I lost control. I didn't mean to hurt you." She began sobbing. "What man?" There was nobody else around. "Don't worry about me, kid. You're in far worse shape." Tim stood back up and asked Tristan, "What do we do? Did we just alter history?" "Jesus, Tim, do you even hear yourself? Random people have random things happen all day long. Besides, they say time heals, right? It'll get sorted out." Tristan kneeled back down. Tim pushed the bike to Tristan, and he helped the little brown-haired girl get into the seat. She wobbled at first and then caught hold and raced down the street. "Only in New York are kids riding bikes in January." Tim shook his head. As they arrived at the newspaper stand, they scoured the papers for the first one with a visible date. There it was, just above the headline that read, "At least 597 are killed in Japanese quake." The date read January 17th, 1995. What little color there was in Tristan's face vacated. "Jesus, I don't even remember that happening. It's crazy how things like that are lost to history," Tim offered, noticing his cousin's apparent shock. "Are you okay?" "We're too late," Tristan mumbled. Tim grabbed the paper from his cousin's hands to take a closer look. "Careful with that, unless you're buying it, and I don't see either of you reaching for your wallets." The voice of a man buried in a minimum of 3 layers of sooted clothes startled them. Tim looked again at the paper. They were, in fact, 12 days too late. Tim dropped the paper and turned back to Tristan. "How the hell did you mess this up?" The look of defeat on Tristan's face was so obvious that Tim took it no further. He was frozen in place. Neither of them paid any mind to the shouts of the overbundled jerk behind them. "We're late," repeated Tristan. "It is what it is now. We need to get indoors and figure out what we're doing next, Tristan. I don't suppose my debit card will get us very far in 1995. Tristan stood in the same place and mumbled, "I have some old cash on me. Let's get a beer." Despite their current situation, or maybe because of their current situation, the thought of a cold beer was very appealing to Tim. As the newsstand whisked the morning's paper away in favor of the evening edition, Tim and Tristan made for the warm glow of the Miller Genuine Draft sign in the window of the building down the street. The laughter within penetrated the heavy wooden door, burdened with several layers of paint, the most recent, black. Tim needed a good laugh. The reality of their failure was finally hitting him, and it wasn't sitting well. He felt anger with the cousin, who, before this morning, he hadn't thought of in a long time, but toward whom he was beginning to feel some sense of camaraderie. He didn't even know how to process this feeling of loss he was beginning to feel. He was only a boy when his folks left. It was a few days past the big birthday bash. He just turned 12. Tristan, about 5 years his minor. Elise, 15, and their fathers were in their 30s, younger than Tim stood today. Today, well, the real today. It felt like a lifetime ago, but here it was, fresh. It only happened almost 2 weeks ago. If he drove out to Chicago now, he'd find himself in the spare room at Grandma's house, covered in blankets, bawling over the loss, with his dear sister Elise by his side, offering comfort. Elise, the sister that never shared with him the secrets of Essence House. How did she even know? Was it a secret shared at an age he had yet to reach? That didn't feel right. And this feeling, what was this feeling? It felt as if being in 1995 brought an abundance of unearned knowledge. Not knowledge, maybe intuition. Tim didn't know. Whatever it is, he felt it present, but could not access it. And he felt like that block brought on his headache that hung heavy on his brow. Also, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being stalked. He didn't want to alarm Tristan, though at times he wanted to wring his neck. So he hadn't said anything. It wasn't something he could even put into words. There was an underscore of paranoia to his thoughts. Something just didn't feel right. As Tim pressed the door appeared to press back. It wasn't locked or stuck. It sort of felt like the door just wasn't meant to be opened. Again, hard to put into words. That was perhaps the overall feeling that Tim was experiencing. Everything he did here took extra effort, an effort he could just barely make. A constant reminder that he didn't belong here. Suddenly, the door was lighter, as a young couple on the other side swung it open to exit the establishment. "Pardon me," said the young lady, as she and her beau slipped past them, the latter handing the door back off to Tim. Tim couldn't help but snicker at the guy's purple IOU sweater, the brand logo and neck of the sweater adorned in turquoise. He looked almost as absurd as Tristan. Tim looked back. Tristan? Where was Tristan? Tim had been so lost in his thoughts that he hadn't noticed him slip away. They hadn't spoken in several minutes, but he knew he'd been right behind him. Tim looked ahead to see if Tristan had slipped into the bar ahead of him, as the couple had slipped out, but the bar was desolate. The heavy door that Tim had been holding for what felt like an eternity was suddenly weightless. Had it been an eternity? A fog hung low in the air. As his headache surged, Tim felt queasy in his stomach. Was the color drained of this place? Or was his vision impaired by whatever had come over his body? A noise in the back of the bar drew Tim's attention. While not typically the noisy type, the unusual circumstances piqued Tim's interest enough to drop the door and make his way across the empty bar. The bar was empty in every sense of the word, besides dust. No glasses, no bottles, no tables, no stools, no patrons, nobody to serve patrons. Not a single decoration adorned its walls. Completely abandoned, save the noise of the room behind the bar. Tim rounded the bar and made his way to the room. He peeked in, trying to assess the situation without giving up his presence. From where he stood, he could see 3 people, though he felt like there may have been a couple more out of sight. Adults all, more or less, sitting around the table. They were playing a card game of some sort. It was not a joyous time being had. Tim felt confusion and anger in the room. More of that intuition, he supposed. He also felt like he recognized some of the people in the room, though he couldn't place it. Tim leaned on the door jamb a bit as his head became hazy. A heaviness in his gut gave way to a pressure in his throat, and he made a noise that appeared to startle the folk in the room as his vision faded. The last thing he heard, as his eyes went black, was the slap of his face hitting the mess below. Some time passed. Tim didn't know how he knew. He'd not yet regained his vision, but it felt like it'd been some time. He laid there, not fighting whatever was happening. Was he dead? He couldn't feel his body or hear a sound. Complete silence. Then he could hear something. He didn't know what he heard. There was something there, sight unseen, but a subtle noise that reminded him of the last noise he heard. The slapping of flesh, but glitching and reverberating. He realized that his headache was gone. In this void, he no longer felt ready to pour out his insides either, but he didn't feel good. In fact, whatever was with him felt devoid of any pleasantry. It emanated dread and despair. "Tim!" a voice cried out over the expanse of black. Tim tried to return the call, but couldn't make a sound. "Tim!" he heard again, and the fleshy slapping noise grew louder this time. Suddenly, Tim was struck with such force that it blew him off his feet. He fell back and crashed to the ground. As he lay there, he could see a white light strobing faintly overhead. It grew, and in his peripheral, he caught a glimpse of his antagonist as it scurried away. As his vision was returning, he could make out a figure standing over him, and he could feel it slapping his cheek. "Tim! Come on, Tim! I need you!" Tristan pleaded. "You just lay there with your eyes open and the occasional moan. Ugh, we need to get back. I just don't know what to do. We don't have anyone to turn to. I can't call Elise. She's only 15. And my dad would freak out if I called him. I'll be right back. I need a soda." Tristan placed his hand on Tim's for a moment, grabbing it in solidarity and then releasing it and dragging it away with him. He closed the door behind him and walked past the nurse's station. "Please keep an eye on him, Jessica. I need something to wake me up," he told the pretty young redhead behind the counter. She smiled. "You keep it up. You could be a commercial for Coke," she shot back. He chuckled some, enjoying the moment as it slipped away, the further he drifted from the cute young nurse. Tristan didn't get it. He knew Tim was having some trouble from the moment they arrived, and he felt it too, but not like that. When Tim fell in through the door at the bar entrance, he hadn't known what was going on, but he was terrified. The paramedics didn't seem fazed at all. They said they were doing this all over town, with the flu outbreak being what it was. But the doctors determined it wasn't flu-related. Tristan had removed Tim's wallet. They couldn't know who Tim was, and nobody could see the things within. He played it safe and told them he'd found the guy and was concerned as a good Samaritan. Maybe staying by the stranger's bedside was a little much, but he had nowhere else to go. It had been a long 3 days since they had dropped the two off at New York Presbyterian Hospital, Brooklyn Methodist. Tristan approached the soda machine with a bit of excitement. He didn't often allow himself sugary treats. He slipped in his quarters and punched the button. A few clicks and a thud, and his soda dropped into the slot below. Jessica was right. He had been downing a lot of these. This wasn't like him. How appropriate, though. Better for her to not get to know the real him. Hopefully, he wouldn't be here much longer. The Coca-Cola bottle, with the beautifully painted festive Santa Claus label, fizzed as it was turned upside down, and Tristan felt completely at ease as he dumped the freezing beverage down his throat. As he walked back past the nurse's station, Jessica shouted for him. "Excuse me, Mr. Edmund? I have something for you." She handed him a folded paper. Tristan thanked her and smiled. Part of him hoped it was her phone number, and part of him knew that could never work out, since he'd be missing for the next 25 years or so. His daydreaming came to a halt as he unfolded the paper and read the words. "Get back to Essence House and leave."
There we go.
Wow. Man, it's been a long time. And that's huge that we go back to that moment several times through the season. And that's the introduction. It doesn't feel like it at the time, but that's the introduction of one of the biggest characters to come, Jessica.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And the tease for...
oh, okay, I can hear you now.
And the tease... Yeah, you have a little bit of a delay. But the tease for the Essence Guard also kind of starts there. Well, no, it doesn't start there. It started in the first one, but it's kind of like the reprisal of that tease, I guess.
We teased harder.
We did. The episode started out with some music in the record store from Blister. That's all I got to say about that.
Sorry, I'm not responding right now because I think I am on a time delay. So you might want to close this one without me, but I'm here.
Well, we only got a couple people in here right now, anyways. Wendy made a couple comments. The girl on the bike. That was a fun scene that gets revisited.
Yeah.
And then the record store makes Wendy nostalgic. And it did that for me too. I had to include the record store in my 1990 episode. So that's Essence House. I'm going to play the Kickstarter video as soon as I find it.
Are you sure about this? We should never have gotten involved. We're way beyond that now. We'll call a meeting soon and figure this out. How is a tool shed worth all this trouble? Wait, you don't know about the shed? It's just easier if I show you. Go outside. You'll understand. What is this? How is this possible? It's supposed to be gone. Tim's eyes slowly opened, and he peered around him. They were not in the Essence House anymore. Essence House by Eric J. Cockrell and Chuck Pineau. Today's the day, asshole.
Hey, are we better now?
You are better now.
I was like, ooh, I have 30 seconds to duck out and come back in and hopefully fix it up.
Woohoo!
So, yeah, guys, the Kickstarter's going on right now. We're trying to raise $2,000 so that we can get you guys some amazing printed novels. Of course, we also have fantastic things such as enamel pins, and you can get audio books, all sorts of great stuff. So we're super excited for you guys to jump on. And how close are we to funding right now, homie?
So we're at 93%. So we just have
93%.
7% to go. That's like nothing.
And we have a little over 2 weeks to go. So we still definitely have some time, which means that not only will you probably be getting your books, but there's probably going to be some pretty sweet stretch goals going on too. So come on out. Check out what we've got going on. Hopefully you guys, we really believe you're going to enjoy it a lot. And you know what? If that wasn't quite enough for you, we have 16 chapters today. I'm glad you like that. That's actually a line from chapter 11? Yeah. That's a fun line from chapter 11. But we have 16 of the chapters up right now. And then on Wednesday, chapter 17 will coming out, which means that more than 75, I think it's closer to 80% by that point, 80% of the entire book will be up there for you guys to enjoy. So,
yeah.
How can you not?
Yeah, like this is like super try it before you buy it. Like
or don't and just buy it. You know, like there's options. You can do whatever you like.
Right. It's pretty awesome. I can't wait to hold that book in my hand.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is going to be a whole other level for me because sadly not everybody in this room is currently an author. So I'm excited to knock that off of my bucket list. And also, you know what? I was rereading chapter 7 or 18 while we were doing this. Yeah, because it's 18 that's about to come out.
Yeah.
And I was rereading 18 while we were doing this, and I was just like, we have come so far. This story has gone so far. And it's insane to think about it. Like at the start of this year, we really had one chapter written and we were working on the second. And now, like, holy crap, we're about to drop a novel on you guys. So it's pretty fantastic. I'm super stoked.
Yeah, and there's just so much else going on too, like plan wise. So I guess if you aren't familiar with our endeavors, we have every other week during our season we do an after show, and so our after show on Thanksgiving Eve in a couple of weeks is going to have probably a reveal or two.
Yep.
That'll be pretty exciting. So check us out. And our podcast is on. We haven't mentioned this in quite a while, but I think we just expect that people know it. But our podcast is like on every network. So
yep.
If you just go to any podcast network and search Essence House, like we'll pop up.
Wait. But that's not Are we on iHeartRadio?
Yeah.
Are we on Stitcher?
Yep.
Are we on Buzzsprout?
Yep.
Is that even a thing? It's so funny.
That's actually our host.
That's right. That's
where we originate from.
Okay, but Amazon Music, that just came out recently. There's no way that we're on that already.
Well, we are actually.
Wait, what? iTunes, Google Store, like literally, guys, all of that. Go check us out. If you do love podcasts and audio dramas, please go check it out. I think you guys will have a blast with it. And if you're into novels, this might just be your thing, man.
Oh, cool. Well, this was fun. It's always fun being Chuck's friend.
It's fun being your friend too.
And yeah, everybody have a good Friday night.
Thanks, guys. Take care of yourselves and enjoy the rest of Indie Event. Thank you guys for having us out. We really appreciate it a lot.
Appreciate the share.
We absolutely do.
Good night.
Take care.